And just as a follow-up to that, a recent publication that you co-authored for the Martin Center looked at the resilience of political parties in Europe as they face an existential crisis. And we know that in the past few years, we just have been having ongoing crisis, we can say, from Brexit to COVID pandemic, Russia's war in Ukraine, rising cost of living, and now the conflict between Israel, Hamas, and potentially Iran. So how can center-right and more mainstream political parties react to this rapidly changing political landscape and voter sentiments in a more effective way?
I mean, the first thing to say, I don't think there's ever been a time where there hasn't been change or crisis. I mean, it's easy, I think, sometimes to think that we are living in particularly difficult times, whereas you can go back 10, 20, 30 years and identify crises that were going on that were in some ways just as challenging for political parties. I would say I think there is a danger for centre-right parties that they become, if you like, obsessed with the threat from the populist radical right to the exclusion of all else. So they become, in a sense, reactive rather than proactive. And they spend more time and give more headspace to the issues that are raised by the populist radical right than the issues that necessarily play well for them. And that, I think, does risk raising the salience, for example, of migration, sometimes the salience of green politics, sometimes the salience of gender politics, to the exclusion of the issues that actually the centre-right has long had an advantage on. And I would say there in particular, obviously, the competent management of the economy, for example, the pursuit of effective international cooperation is another one. And a general sense in some ways that, the centre-right is able to tap into and understand and adapt to the zeitgeist, the spirit of the age, if you like. So I think, one thing that you can say for centre-right parties is that they do have some advantages, and they are historically advantages, and they shouldn't forget those in the pursuit, if you like, of a sort of populist radical right light agenda, which in the end, I think if you chase that too hard, you end up giving the populist right more oxygen, more publicity, and in some ways, in the end, perhaps more support that wouldn't necessarily be the case.
And what about transnational populism? Are there instances in the EU where populist movement across member countries have influenced or collaborated with each other?
Well, we're talking about this after recent events in Brussels, where we had this NatCon conference that was, of course, broken up by the police on the first day and then allowed to continue on the second day, which, of course, earns those national populists a lot of publicity. I'm rather sceptical about the extent to which actually their cooperation is meaningful at an institutional level. I mean, we will have to see what happens after the European Parliament elections, but it is quite difficult for parties that are essentially nationalistic, if you like, to combine with each other as effectively as is the case, for example, for the EPP or the SND. So I think quite a lot of the cooperation, such as it is that we see now, is at the level really of kind of imitation and flattery and the hope that you can draw lessons from the success of a populist party in one country for another country. And actually, sometimes, there are lessons and they can learn things from each other, the tricks of the trade, if you like. But I don't think it's always easy to transplant, for example, what Trump has done in America or what Viktor Orban has done in Hungary to other contexts. So, something we have to keep an eye on, but I'm sceptical as to, the real results and meaningfulness of what's going on at the moment.
And let us look ahead for a second. What future trends do you anticipate for centre-right conservatism in the EU and the UK? Do you see any emerging ideologies or movements that could redefine the political centre?
I mean, I'm in some ways rather pessimistic about the situation because I feel that there are many politicians on the centre-right, as indeed that actually there are politicians on the centre-left, who feel that the only way of coping with the populist radical right is to some extent to copy what it's doing, at least rhetorically, if not necessarily always in policy terms. despite the fact that actually all the research from political scientists, and I'm not just including me in this, suggests that certainly in the long term, it isn't the way to go, because all you do is raise the salience of the issues that play to the strengths of the populist radical right, while, if you like, not allowing room for the issues that play well for the centre-right, and indeed in some cases the centre-left as well. As to why politicians on the centre-right insist on taking that line, your guess is as good as mine. But hopefully the publications that you were talking about earlier and some of the research that political scientists are doing, all over Europe will eventually make its way through to the thinking of centre-right parties, so that they concentrate on their strengths, if you like, rather than always worrying and looking over their shoulder at what the populist radical right are doing.
Thank you very much, Professor Tim Bale, for your insights, and thank you all for watching. Please remember to follow the Martin Center on social media for further research, events, and activities. See you soon.